Hello everyone, this is Shantan Mitra from Accenture Labs, Bangalore, India. I am here to present our demo paper ICM, Intent and Conversation Mining from Conversation Logs. This is a schematic diagram of the flow of our system. It has two main parts. One is the intent mining and conversation mining. Under intent mining tab, once the data is uploaded, we cluster the data and the clusters are labeled and they are verified by the SMEs. Further, we use this label data for the training purpose, for training the classifiers. Also, we have some additional models to detect the sentiment, emotion, and causal analysis within the data. Once we're done with the intent mining under conversation mining, the state levels that we have, we use it for generation of the graphs, which are further used for the generation of the temporal and atemporal conversation flows. For today's demo, we have used this sample data. So it has two main columns. First is the conversation column, which actually contains the conversation between the customer and the agent. And the second is the conversation summary column, which we actually generate a summary of the given conversation using a pre-trained summarization model. So under intent mining, we have the intent discovery part where we upload the data, perform clustering, generate a label data, and then ultimately goes for the training. So once we select a corpus, then we can select all the cluster parameters, we save it, and once we click on the generate cluster, we have these two buckets. One is the labeled and unlabeled clusters. We can click on the cluster report to see how many total number of data points are there, and out of them how many are being clustered, what are the total number of clusters. So if we click on the labeled cluster, we can see we have total 8 clusters and all are being labeled. So if we click in any one of the cluster, we can see what is the label of the cluster, and these are some of the label suggestions that we provide for this particular cluster. And if we click on more, we can see the original conversation. Under review intent tab, SMEs select the corpus and a particular intent, and then add the option either to update the labels or to delete the utterances which they feel that not relevant. Under intent priority tab, user can select the corpus and the top intents, and they have the visualization of what are the top intents and how many conversations are that are tagged with these intents. Once we have this label data, we use it for training our classifier. In this particular case, you can see like we have used these label clusters to classify this multi-use data set where we have achieved a classification accuracy of 96.17%. Now under sentiment analysis, we assign sentiment to each of the utterances within the conversation, and we have a graph for them also as well as for the agent and the customer, and it depicts like okay how the conversation, how their sentiment is changing with each of the utterances. Similarly, we also assign emotions to each of the utterances within the conversation. Further, for each for the customers, we have shown like okay for a given emotion, what are the part of the text or the utterance that is actually responsible for this information. So under conversation mining, we have the state labeling, where each agent utterances is given assigned a label with a question type or a response type. We use the state labels to generate the conversation graph and conversation flow. So these green nodes actually represent the agent responses, and the yellow nodes are representing the questions asked by the agents. And if we click on each of the in any of the node, we can see okay these are the actually agent utterances. Similarly, if we click on any of the edge, we can see the customer utterances. So once we have done with the conversation graph, we can use the conversation flow. This is more intuitive, where each edge is assigned with a weight also, like how many times there is a transition from one node to the another. And similarly here also, if we click on any of the node or the edges, we can see the utterances. We can also generate the temporal conversation flow, like for a given time period. Here we have selected like for a first January to February 2020, and again June to July 2020. We want to see like how the conversation for this particular intent book restaurant hotel is changing, and here we can see how the conversation flow has actually changed. And if we want, we can also check for the similar and dissimilar nodes. Like if we select the similar node and edges option, it will actually highlight the similar edges and similar paths between the two different time period for the same intent. and these are the informations that are given. Similarly, for the two different intent also, we can, for the same time period but two different intent also, we can compare the two different conversation flows. Thank you everyone, and please feel free to ask any questions.